Section 13 of Wanderings in New South Wales, Batavia, Pedir Coast, Singapore and China, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jennifer Beckett-Wood. Wanderings in New South Wales, Batavia, Pedir Coast, Singapore and China, Volume 1 by George Bennett. Chapter 13. How agreeable it is at all times to see a strong feeling of attachment, more especially when conspicuous in a female. Who has read that beautiful tale Waverley, and failed to admire this feeling so well displayed by Flora MacIver towards her unfortunate brother? And other instances equally beautiful and correct are scattered over our literary productions, founded on our true tales. It is met with, emanating from the human heart, both in savage and civilized life, and it is correctly stated by an elegant writer that there is a latent intellectual force in woman, capable of being called into action only by circumstances of the deepest moment and on occasions of peculiar excitement. And it is further observed that she who complains the airs of heaven visit her too roughly will undergo, without a murmur, more acute sufferings than man may know, and the seeming heartless coquette who wins our contempt at the assembly will prove, in the hour of sorrow and affliction, a benign and ministering angel. Perhaps some may feel disappointed when they find this digression only introduces a brief tale of one of that degraded race, an Australian savage in whom this feeling was strong and which occurred in this part of the colony, not in one of that amiable and gentle variety of the sex who grace the assemblies and parks and form the domestic happiness in our native land. A female of one of the aboriginal tribes in the Murrumbidgee country formed an attachment and cohabited with a convict named Tallboy, who, becoming a bushranger, was for a long time sought after by the police for the many atrocities he had committed, but always eluded pursuit. This female concealed him with true native ingenuity and baffled his pursuers. She would fish and hunt for him whilst he remained secluded in the retreat she chose. She often visited the stockkeepers' huts at the different stations, and whatever provision she received from them was immediately conveyed to the unworthy object of her devoted attachment. Although many knew she was privy to his concealment, yet it was found impossible to elude her vigilance by following her and thus discover his retreat. She evaded all attempts, and seemed ever watchful for his safety, probably knowing the fate that awaited him if taken. Neither promises of rewards, enough to excite the cupidity of any individual, but one in whom a higher feeling was paramount, nor threats could induce her even to acknowledge she was acquainted with his place of concealment, much more betray it. Nay, it has occurred more than once, when there was a fear of discovery, that she has given voluntary information to the police of having seen him 30 or 50 miles distant, when, in fact, his place of concealment was in the immediate neighbourhood. The brute, however, manifested no kindred affection with this female, but would frequently beat and ill-use her. Whilst she administered to him the refreshing cup of kindness, he bestowed on her misery in return. He had in one instance given way to his natural brutish disposition by ill-treating the being who had done so much for him, when he was on the verge of discovery, indeed had given himself up all hopes of escape, when again she saved him by engaging to point out to the police his place of retreat, and absolutely led them away, under that pretence, in a contrary direction, affording her paramour both time and opportunity to seek out a safer asylum. When she arrived with the police at the spot she had informed them he last was, he of course was not there, and a strict search in the vicinity was equally unsuccessful. She then left them to continue their pursuit after the criminal, pretending to know nothing further respecting him or his place of concealment. At last he was captured by venturing out too boldly during her absence, was tried, condemned, and expiated his offences on the scaffold at Sydney. She wished to follow him on hearing he was a prisoner, but that was impossible, so, reclaimed by her tribe, she was obliged to become an unwilling wife of one of the blacks. It is but too well known in what degradation the female sex are held among savage nations, so different from the deference and respect so justly given to that amiable and gentle portion of the creation in civilized life. This unfortunate female was ordered by her husband, whose word is law, to follow him at a time when she was rendered incapable by illness. On her hesitating, he struck her with savage barbarity with his tomahawk so severely over the head and legs that she fainted from loss of blood. She was found lying on the ground and taken to the house of a settler residing on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, and every kindness and attention shown her. But after lingering, suffering severe mental and bodily anguish, she expired. There is a son by this female and her convict paramour, about 3 years old, living with the tribe, who are so attached to him that for the present it has been found difficult to get him away from them, so that he may be brought up in a civilized state of society. On the following morning I left Jugiong and resumed my journey through a very interesting portion of country. The banks of the Murrumbidgee stream were adorned with large swamp oaks, chloe of the Aborigines, magnificent water gums, daha and yarra of the Aborigines, and immense quantities of a species of mallow, rising to the height of from 2 to 6 feet, and which at this time was profusely in flower, decorating the banks, mingled with other flowering plants. This mallow is named kumban by the natives, and upon the banks, or in the vicinity of the river, is a species of urtica, kundalong of the Aborigines, resembling the European species buttercups. The small red poppies, geranium, and other plants, similar to or closely allied to the European species, were abundant. After riding a distance of 7 miles, Cooney's station was passed, situated at a fertile spot called Kittegarrary Creek. Passing by the Money Range, the scenery consisted of picturesque but broken country, thinly wooded, abounding in rich pasturage. The whole appeared a fine grazing land, some parts being also well calculated for sheep, the whole for cattle. After leaving this range, an extensive, beautiful, and luxuriant plain or flat, surrounded in the distance by gradually sloping, verdant ranges of hills, was entered upon. This flat was carpeted by thick grass and gay flowers, and near a small creek a quantity of plants with pink flowers, having at a distance some resemblance to our well-known red clover, attracted my attention. It seems to be of the natural family Amaranthaceae, probably of the genus Nicanthes. Although the ground was strewed with flowering shrubs and plants, but very few appeared peculiar to this portion of the colony. The kangaroo grass, Antisteria australis, was the most lofty and luxuriant among the native grasses, covering the soil, about which different species of eucalypti were scattered, among them the box tree of the colony, bere of the natives, bastard apple tree, carbut of the natives, bastard box tree, bargain of the Aborigines, and ironbark, mucka of the natives, were most numerous. At this season they were covered with a profusion of white blossoms, which attracted flocks of paroquets to sip, like the puny hummingbird, nectar from the flowers. Occasionally the green wattle, or wandua of the natives, was seen loaded with its fragrant yellow blossoms, and also a few trees of the bum bilorang, or Banksia rosmarinifolia. I rode for a few miles through this fertile flat, which continued undiminished in picturesque beauty until again the dark foliage of the ploe, or swamp oaks, indicated the proximity to the fine stream of the Murrumbidgee, and, arriving at its banks, crossed to the farm of Mr. Warby, called Darbilara, where I was glad to rest after a long and sultry ride of 30 miles. This farm, situated in a beautiful spot, is close to the junction of the Tumat and Murrumbidgee rivers. On approaching the river, the feathered creation in mingled harmony animated the scene. The tinkling note of the bellbird, or gilbulla, of the natives was heard, a certain harbinger of the vicinity of water, and these birds were very numerous. Perched on a lofty tree, the razor grinder bird of the colonists may be heard uttering its peculiar skizziaring notes, which so closely resemble the noise of the razor grinder's machine as to render its appellation well deserved. The bird first commences with a rather prolonged whistling note, which is succeeded by the peculiar grinding notes, continued for some time without intermission, resembling in some degree the noise produced by the drums of the male Tetigoniae, whose dinning notes resound through the woods during summer, almost to the exclusion of all other harmonious or inharmonious sounds. I visited the spot, situated not many yards distant from the house, at which the junction of the Murrumbidgee with the Tumat River takes place. Many persons consider the latter to have the more direct course, and consequently to be the main stream which is continued to the sea, according to the discovery of Captain Sturt, and that the Murrumbidgee enters itself into the Tumat. Others differ from this opinion, but in point of fact, both streams unite at this place and form one continuous river, as seen in the accompanying diagram, the water supplied by each being nearly of equal proportions. The Tumat River, which I saw as high as Mr. Rose's cattle station at Bean, and a distance of 12 or 14 miles beyond that station, making a distance from the junction of 40 or 50 miles, was equal in breadth and depth of stream to the Murrumbidgee, had numerous creeks emptying their waters into it, and also swamps about its banks, overflown during floods, and even now absorbing a large quantity of water. Among other creeks which empty themselves into the Tumat is a fine stream, called by the aborigines the Bean or Geek, from which the station has received its name. The Tumat may probably rise from a mass of mountains to the southward, divided from Monaro or Monero plains by a lofty ridge of mountains. Neither the origin of this or the Murrumbidgee River, however, is ascertained. It was stated to me in this part of the colony that the natives call all large rivers Murrumbidgee, and I certainly heard it applied by them equally to the Tumat and Murrumbidgee streams, but I found they usually named the river after the country through which it flows, so that on demanding the name of the river at different places, many names are bestowed upon it. A person unaware of this circumstance is surprised at the number of names the same stream obtains. Thus, the Yass River at one part is called Gondaroo by the natives, and this occasioned many to suppose the correct name of the Yass River was Gondaroo, until it was ascertained that it received that appellation from the portion of country of the same name through which it passed, afterwards receiving the name of Yass or Yar when flowing through its plains. By the latter name, however, the entire stream is known to Europeans, which is a better method of nomenclature than that adopted by the natives. The Tumat at Mr. Warby's farm was called Bewok, and as a variety of the river cod receives the same native name, the river might either be named after the number of fish found in it, or the fish from being found abundant in that particular part of the river. For a very short distance further up the stream, the aborigines bestow a different name upon it from the country through which it flows. I mention these circumstances, hoping some future traveller may have opportunities of further inquiry, confirming my statements if correct, or refuting them should they prove erroneous. The sand in and about the banks of the Murrumbidgee River have a glittering appearance, which led many to report that gold dust abounded. But those who made the assertion have yet to learn that it is not all gold that glitters, for on examination the glittering particles are found to be merely talc. When a well was about to be sunk at a distance from 300 to 400 yards from the banks of this river, opposite to and not far distant from Mr. Warby's farm, At a depth of 13 feet, in an alluvial soil, a quantity of charcoal was found, and at a further depth of 20 feet, more was discovered. Abundance of river cod was taken from the river, and I usually had plenty of fine fish as long as I remained in this or the tumut countries, in those parts adjacent to the fine rivers. Aquatic fowl were not less abundant, more especially the black duck or budding bong of the natives, a species of teal, the taurodi of the natives, and wood ducks, which from their peculiar note the aborigines name kunaruk, resembling the sound those birds utter. All afforded an excellent meal, ofttimes even with the addition of green peas, as most of the stations have small vegetable gardens attached to them. The wild turkey of the colony, kumbal of the natives, a species of bustard, is occasionally seen about this part of the country and Yas plains, but they are so very shy as to render it difficult to get within shot of them. The following morning, December the 9th, I proceeded through the Tumut country. On leaving Darbalara, much swampy land was passed, varied by plains and hills, abounding in pasturage, in which the kangaroo grass, Ancisteria australis, grew to the height of 4 feet, and numerous creeks emptying their waters into the stream of the Tumut. The numerous lagoons and flats, swamps or marshes, for by all these names they seem equally known, had a fresh green appearance, occasioned by the young reeds springing up, which are greedily devoured by cattle and horses, as in that stage of growth they are sweet and contain abundance of mucilage. As they advance in growth, the verdure they possessed is succeeded by arid brown stems, surmounted by feathered blossoms, which wave and bend with a rustling noise to the breeze that sweeps by them. The road continued through a pleasing country, abounding in vales rich with vegetation, about which hills, thinly scattered with trees, but densely clothed with herbage, rose, of different forms and heights, varied by the swamp oaks, water gum, and other eucalypti, which, by their greener foliage, indicated the proximity and course of the Tumut River. Or a reedy swamp would be seen near the banks of the stream, from which often some large cranes, with lead-coloured plumage, called gungaroo by the natives, would arise. After riding a distance of 8 miles, we arrived at a station called Brungle, the property of a Mr. Kagan, and were refreshed by some milk. Indeed, the excellent milk that can always be readily procured at any of the stations in this luxuriant grazing part of the colony is a great comfort, with the additional ones of excellent butter, cheese, and damper. The flats or plains near the stations are seen animated by immense droves of cattle, revelling in all the luxury furnished by a rich herbage. This part of the colony may be correctly termed a land flowing with milk, and even, we may say occasionally, with honey, as the latter is sometimes procured by the native blacks from the hollow trunk of a tree. By watching the direction in which the bees fly when proceeding homeward, and following them, they thus discover and rob the industrious insects of the sweets of their life. I remarked with some degree of pleasure that although most of the stations are solely under charge of assigned servants, convict is an obsolete word in the colony, yet the huts are clean and well arranged. The men in most instances take care of the property entrusted to their charge, and are surrounded by every comfort. Many of them, particularly those from the sister kingdom, have frequently assured me they never were so happy and well off before, and regarded their transportation as a blessing from Providence. And it certainly appeared to be a delightful change to many of the poor fellows from the previous wretched lives they must have passed, both from their unvarnished tales, as well as what we know to be too true in unhappy Ireland. Proceeding on my journey, the Tumut was occasionally visible, the road often leading away from it to avoid the extensive reedy swamps which abound close to its banks in some places, while in others fine meadow land with profuse and rich herbage about which herds of cattle were feeding was seen. The trees near the river, from being constantly refreshed by the water, had a vividness of foliage which enlivened the prospect, and imparted a smiling appearance to the country. Travelling was excellent, but the places now passed with so much facility are, during the heavy rains in winter, overflown and rendered nearly, if not totally, impassable. After crossing several creeks, emptying themselves into the stream of the Tumat, and riding about 8 or 10 miles, I arrived at a mountainous range called Menjungbury, upon which were growing large quantities of a species of calatrese, called the Murrumbidgee pine by the colonists, from having been seen first on the hills in the vicinity of that river. It is named Kara by the aborigines. The timber is described as close-grained and durable. The native blacks use it for fish spears on account of its lightness, which occasions it to float on the surface of the water. The white and rather fragrant gum resin, which exudes spontaneously in tears or drops from the trunk, is also used by them for several purposes, and the largest tree I saw about this range was 35 feet in elevation and 1 to 1.5 feet in diameter. The geological character of the range upon which they grow, as far as I was capable of ascertaining, consisted of granite and quartz. They were readily distinguished from other trees on the same range by their dark green foliage and peculiar form. I collected several specimens of the tree in a state of fructification. The currajong tree was also occasionally seen about the range. It is named bundine by the aborigines, who eat both the young roots and shoots of the tree and use the bark in the manufacture of a small cordage for nets, etc. Some of the roots are described to be a foot in circumference, like the stalk of a cabbage, consisting of medullary and fibrous substance, having a sweetish and agreeable taste. A station situated in a fine fertile flat called Bumbolly, the property of Mr. Shelley, was next passed, and a few miles further brought me to Mr. Rose's cattle station called Bean, located in a fertile, picturesque situation surrounded by verdant hills and wooded mountains. The Tumat River and a fine creek running through the estate, it is excellent in situation and has capabilities for a valuable farm. I remained here a few days to examine this but little known country, as also to observe the objects of natural history which abounded in the vicinity. End of chapter 13.